Let's talk about System Shock. I know very little about System Shock 1. I know that it's a very iconic game, although at the same time, System Shock 2 feels like the one that really put the franchise on the map, all this stuff. With that AI, I've forgotten the name of. Shodan. Yes. But yeah, System Shock 1, big deal, big iconic game. However, I think they could have done a better job with the marketing to make sure people knew that such a game was coming to PlayStation 5. However, is it any good?
It is good, Scott. It's really good. It tickled my pickle last week. I played it for about 20 hours to get the main story done alongside most of the extra exploration you can do. And I'm similar to you, you know, I know a lot about System Shock 2, but System Shock 1 is a major blind spot. And like I said, I've been looking forward to this game to come to consoles since it dropped on PC last year and got pretty good reviews. So I had high expectations going in. And it's a really interesting project. It's a really interesting remaster / remake because it's very faithful, as far as I can tell, to the original's structure and the original's gameplay.
Right.
But I want to talk about its art style first and foremost, because when you look at it, it's got this beautiful lighting, it looks high res, it is very visually appealing, but it does this thing where it blends a kind of retro throwback style with modern graphics, and it's hard to explain. Hopefully the footage and the video version of this will do it more justice, but for instance, some of the items in the environment kind of have this polygonal design where it doesn't look like it's been taken from the PC era that the original System Shock was on, but it's kind of there to evoke it. So you have this blend of like cartoony realism with a strange retro angular style. It is so hard to explain it. It took me by surprise and I was not expecting it at all, but it kind of works.
I love that stuff. Yeah,
it kind of works because I don't know, it is like if your brain up-resed one of those old games, you know, in that sense. Obviously, a few improvements here and there to the overall texture work, and like I said, the lighting is phenomenal, but a very interesting way to do a remake visually, and honestly, kind of closer to something like, in a good way, I mean this, the Grand Theft Auto Definitive Edition, you know, the way that updated the PS2 models without going completely photorealistic, but without going just like an up-resed remaster of what was there initially. Very strange, but very cool.
I like that whole new kind of like hyper-polygonal look that a few new games have got, like Teardown comes to mind for that. I love the look of that game. I forget the name of the really polygonal-looking Doom game from a couple of years ago. Yeah. But that had that style. Like it kind of frees up the processing power a little bit and lets you do a little bit more with either frame rates or just deformation of the environment or whatever. But System Shock 2 is when Ken Levine came in. Like I think a lot of people associate System Shock with him, but System Shock 1, as far as I know, he didn't have anything to do with that. But like, does it have a BioShock vibe?
Oh,
I feel
absolutely,
like, right, because that feels like the inroad is like, is this a good like stopgap on the way to BioShock 4 or something?
You know what it really is, and we've been talking about Prey a lot over the past few weeks, and immediately as I started playing, I just thought, this is reminding me of Prey, or I suppose in reality, Prey is reminding me of this. You can like trace a lot of the elements and the mechanics back to something like the original System Shock. So to see them faithfully updated here, like, it still plays really well. The improvements that have been made, you know, make for a more impactful experience. You know, like the gunplay is a little bit more rewarding. There are a bunch of cyberspace mini games where you're essentially playing a bullet hell shooter for a little bit, something, you know, closer to Resogun than Prey or anything like that, or BioShock, and that's really cool. So it definitely is. You can, if you're a fan of this genre, you can play through System Shock now, have a fresh and modern experience while being able to trace back the games that you love in the subgenre today, kind of like back to it. I thought that was really cool. And you know, it's not always a plus. There are some elements of the kind of retro design that have been brought over that I don't think the game necessarily needed in terms of, you know, just checkpoints that dick you over, especially towards the end, and a bit of BS that now feels a little bit outdated. But what I love about it, first and foremost, is, let me explain the plot. You are this hacker who essentially gets taken to this space station that then gets overrun by this AI called Shodan, who has been creating these cyborg cyborg mutants. You wake up and you're essentially battling against those while exploring the space station and trying to destroy this AI. And that works in a cool way where you're going level by level and you have to do like a lot of backtracking, you have to do a lot of exploration, and while you can turn on waypoints, by default the game doesn't have them on, so you're essentially it's an immersive sim, so you are immersed in this environment and you have to explore, you have to engage with the environment to even figure out what to do. One of the very first mistakes I made was accidentally starting a laser that destroyed all of humanity, Scott, because I just thought, that's a red button, I'm gonna press it, see what happens.
Or just shot down and shot the earth.
I don't know if you've seen Succession, right?
Yeah.
You know that bit where Roman's watching the rocket launch in the bathroom and he wants it to go well and the rocket takes off and then it suddenly explodes and he's just like, nope.
Put that down.
That's almost like the exact reaction.
Did you live with this consequence?
Well, this is the thing. It's like a fail state, so you're not supposed to do it.
Right.
One of the main objectives in the early game is stopping that laser from going off and taking everything
I like that
out.
they let you do it, though.
But the fact that they let you do it and make those mistakes is really cool, because then I suddenly knew what to do. It's, I need to stop this somehow. I need to find the items that are necessary and I need to put an end to this, and you do that by just exploring the levels, listening to the audio tapes that are scattered around, which give you, door codes and access to key cards on certain bodies that unlock doors. It's very old school in that way. You've got like these labyrinthine levels with locked doors, and the most of the game is fighting enemies and unlocking those doors to get to the next area, which I love that stuff. I love it when it was brought back to Doom 2016, and I love it in my immersive sims.
Give you a yellow key card.
Yeah, giving you a yellow key card, a personal key card, whatever it is. That's most of the objectives in the game, but like this is one of the games that kind of started that trend, and it's again surprising how much it still works today as a gameplay loop. Like I felt satisfied every single time I found one and thought, right, okay, in that sort of Metroidvania style of, I remember this locked door on level 5, so I'll get in the elevator, I'll go down there and see what's in that door. Maybe it'll open up a way to progress the critical path, or maybe it might just have some cool extras in there. Just like that loop for me is great.
That's the thing I want to zero in on for a sec, because I feel like in the last 30 years, because System Shock's 1994 for the original one, that whole kind of like what now will be referred to as obtuse level design or obtuse puzzle design or whatever, did that ever feel like a true roadblock, or did that feel like it walks that line of actually being challenging, like you want to go and explore the space station? But in general, like I kind of have that, it's a fine line for me where I'm like, I've already backtracked 5 or 6 times, I'm combing individual pixels at this point trying to find something, and then you get a key card, then you get an unlock code or whatever it is, and then you're freed up for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, okay, I'm stuck again. Like, how's the flow?
There are roadblocks, especially towards the end, that just almost made me tear my hair out. Like there is one moment where you need to get a code to punch into this terminal, and the numbers from it, you've been seeing the entire game, but if you don't know what they are, if you haven't played the original, and you're not noting them down as you go, you're going to have to go back to like 6 different floors, remember where the rooms were to get those numbers and put them in the right order. And I remember doing that, and I'd only saved a few because I was screenshotting as I went, because I was like, these numbers have got to mean something eventually. So I had 2 or 3, but even then going back for the other 3 and finding the areas where I was supposed to go was really annoying. But at the same time, like this is an old school game that like doesn't have like those waypoints. I mean, you can turn them on if you want, if you do get stuck.
That's
which is
interesting.
Really cool. But I like the idea that you're like, it's a game that encourages you to take notes, which again, I really love. I like finding a locked door and putting a marker down on the map, or writing down a little reminder of where I need to revisit, or if I find a code for something, writing down that code, then I eventually find a keypad and I'm like, right, well, I'll try this. Oh, it's unlocked the door. It is sort of, requires that sort of brain space and that kind of critical thinking, I guess, which I like. But there are times where you just think, I have kind of no idea what to do or where to go. If you haven't been making those notes and you're just expecting the game to kind of serve it up, it will hit you with those roadblocks. And honestly, to me, the biggest roadblock was the difficulty in general. You'll laugh at this, Scott, because you know I like to play games on hard. But
you do.
This time
First time
around,
through.
This time around, I thought, you know what? I'll keep it to the default difficulty. It's an old game. It's probably going to kick my ass at some point. So I started the game, and I regretted it because the first few areas I thought, this is actually too easy. I'm not getting scared. I'm not feeling that element of I'm scraping through and just surviving. I was so pleased that I just stuck it on the default difficulty by the end because you can't change once you start, and I would have knocked this down to easy towards the end because it is a punishing game with a bunch of gotcha moments. Some fine and funny, but some that are just BS. I think one thing that could have been updated is the game has fail states, but it usually kicks you back to, you know how in BioShock you have those chambers where you kind of respawn from? There's a version of that in this game that you can unlock on every level, so you will always respawn from that point if you die. But seemingly arbitrarily, at certain points, the game will just give you a permanent game over. You'll get a cutscene where Shodan has won, and you have to restart from a proper saved save file, which is fine if you have been saving, because you can save whenever you want. If you've been doing that all the way through the game and reloading those, you'll be fine. But if you last saved a while ago, if you have an auto save that was from a while ago, you're gonna have to redo those that progress.
That's a death knell to me.
And it only sucks because the game doesn't warn you that you're in one of those states, and because they're seemingly random, like some boss fights, but not all will have them. And then it just makes the game decides that the final 2 levels, which is some of the hardest in terms of combat, you just have it every time you die. And it's like, okay, this is just elongating the experience for the sake of it. It feels arbitrary. It doesn't feel rewarding. Now it's just a case of, okay, you've taken away checkpoints, and
so
I have to save all the time. It is a kind of what you put up with. I think once you understand that, and if it's not taking you by surprise, you can just save, and then it does make the game easier anyway because you're giving yourself your own checkpoints, so you can save before you do a big boss encounter or a big enemy encounter or whatever. I think the only downside to that is when you do have a checkpoint and you respawn, and the enemies you killed or damaged stay damaged or killed in the items you picked up. So there is an incentive to not just reload the save and kind of actually respawn and try it again, because everything that you've done before that point, before you died, will carry over to this next quote-unquote life. But there are a lot of those BS moments where I just thought, like, why? You know I'm going into a boss fight, and you didn't tell me it was going to be a permanent death state, and obviously I've died because I've never fought this thing before, and now you've kicked me back 20 minutes, half an hour. That's the stuff where I'm like, I think you could have modernized this a little bit without...
Like if you're gonna remake it.
Yeah, without losing the core experience. I imagine, the die-hard System Shock fans, watching or listening to this will be saying like, no, I wanted it exactly the way I remembered, and I get that, but for new players like me, that stuff does feel like it is just kind of wasting your time in a way that the other parts of the game don't really.
I do like that they've got things like the optional waypoints. Like you said, if I'm going back to a game from the 90s, like I would like it to still retain that sense of arduousness to get through it. Like there's a reason that people go back to the Resident Evil 1 remake because it still kind of has the same like flow as the actual one on PlayStation 1 or whatever. I want to ask about the story. Obviously no spoilers, but 1994 was a very different time for storytelling in video games. Like a lot more sparse storytelling, a lot stuff just kind of based on concepts. Like you nailed the concept before, but that idea of like a narrative payoff towards the end, like things like that, does it feel worthwhile for the story to play through it, or is it more like mechanical gameplay side?
It definitely is more mechanical gameplay side, but the story, and I think more importantly the world building, is still good. Like the story is not the most complex thing in the world. It is kind of pretty much as straightforward as it sounds. You're going against this AI. There are a few other characters that you get to know, but it is still satisfying. Like it's very creepy in terms of Shodan popping up and talking to you or listening to the fall of the station through audio logs. I think the audio logs in particular are really well done. There are loads of them, but I loved listening to every single one. Like it tells a really good story of what was happening before you woke up, essentially, which is, another classic sort of survival horror and immersive sim trope at this point, but that stuff makes it worthwhile and makes it more than just a mechanical experience for me. The story, like I said, the overall story pretty much straightforward, but the flavor text, the world building, the space station itself, and the detail there, I think is really cool. Honestly, I know you're not going to like this, Scott, maybe. Well, I got Prey vibes, but I also got Doom 3 vibes. And if you know me, you know I love Doom 3.
You should... Look, there'll be a swath of people out there loving the Doom 3. Yeah. I'm not one of them, but I mean, you should preach to your people.
It's just the idea of like, you open a door. It's a very bloody game, which is cool. Like I said, it's kind of leans into the cartoon elements a little bit, but it's a very bloody game. Like you'll go into an area and you'll have like these half human, half cyborgs hooked up to machines that are getting experimented on. You'll have like just dead bodies strewn all across the floor. It has that sort of horror vibe to it, and especially the audio design sort of plays into that. I thought the audio was incredible. I played most of the game with headphones on. And the on PS5, so the 3D audio of that system like made it again extra immersive because these enemies hit hard. And just being able to sort of pinpoint the industrial mechanical steps of some of these mutants like around one corner.
That's cool.
One made it more immersive, but two, like actually gave me a bit of tactical awareness because I was like, okay, I need to get ready. I need to put my shield on. I need to go around the corner and like take these guys on. And the gameplay starts. Just to pivot into that, I know I'm just rambling now.
No,
I
was going to say
nothing but this game.
I should have asked you about combat earlier on because when you said like, obviously the concept you're exploring the space station and stuff, like BioShock, like there's a whole thing. I know like System Shock 2 onwards and BioShock and whatever. That's Ken Levine's era for the Shock games, and he's sort of notoriously known for aiming for brains and brawn. And then people like different parts of those games. I notoriously have gone on record saying that I would much prefer BioShock 1 to be a walking sim. I think the combat side of those games is the worst part about them. I love the worlds, love the character writing, etc. But going all the way back to System Shock 1 and before he came on board, the combat. How is the combat? Is there much of it? Does the combat feel satisfying? Like, wouldn't class it as a first-person shooter? I wouldn't have thought.
It kind of would, and that surprised me because when it first started, I thought combat was going to take a back seat, but there is loads of combat and loads of enemies in the game, and it's way more in depth than I expected. Like you start off like a lot of FPS games at the time, like you have a piece of pipe that you're breaking robots and mutants down with, but then you slowly accrue an arsenal of different pistols, laser weapons, assault rifles, your shotguns, like your kind of classics, but there's depth to them in the enemy types and the ammo types that you're using. So mainly you're fighting robots or kind of mutants or robot-mutant hybrids, and you need to change your ammo types depending on what enemy you're facing. You might have EMP grenades that are really good against robots but obviously do nothing against the mutants, gas grenades that are great against the mutants but don't do much against the robots and stuff like that. So you're always kind of, it's not just going in with like the biggest gun and emptying a clip and then hoping for the best. Like the level design, you sort of have to think about every engagement and kind of what weapon is best suited for that engagement, and that took me by surprise, and I thought it was really cool, especially towards the end when you have this big arsenal and you have all these enemies coming for you. It's like a little bit of combat chess you might die initially, but to go into that fight thinking, right, I need to put my shield on, I need to use this weapon, I need to make sure it's charged because you have a health meter and a energy meter. So the energy weapons use that energy. So it's like, right, do I want to use the energy to buff my shield, or do I want to use it as ammo? So like making those decisions made it feel like a really intense survival horror game. And I thought that element, I was not expecting that at all, and that made the combat, even at its most frustrating, a lot of fun and really satisfying to get through, because it's not like, it's not as smooth as a Doom or anything like that. It feels it has the clunk of an old PC game, even though it has been remade. But just that tactical depth, I thought was, again, really surprising and really fun. I feel like
one of the biggest positives for the whole thing, and I think it's also something that someone could drop off, and by someone I mean me, overcoming all of this stuff at once, like the level design, the obtuse nature of it, like the door codes, key cards over and over again, combat, the gotcha moments, combat maybe being a bit, you got to pick and choose your way through specific encounters. I think that can be extremely rewarding, and it's not like I don't love survival horror games, but if you're going back to something that's 30 years old and then being remade, and like I said, I like that they put different options in there to try and ease things through, but obviously you want the proper OG experience, or you want to overcome this thing. That's why System Shock is such a big deal. How did you find that overall when you hit credits? It was like, that was worth putting up with, or not?
It was for me, but I was playing through it thinking this Scott would hate this, and rightly so, because like those roadblocks it throws up, like it's a punishing game. Right. It is a really punishing game, and sometimes that's fair and sometimes it feels unfair. And I think the game for me misses a trick by not allowing the difficulty levels to be adjustable in game, because it has really good difficulty levels before you start. Instead of like the regular normal, medium, or hard, it has 3 tiers for each individual main aspect of gameplay. So you could have combat on 1, and you could have puzzle puzzles on 3. You know, make the puzzles harder, make the combat easier. You can tweak it like that. But obviously, if you've never played System Shock before, you don't know what to expect puzzle-wise or combat-wise. So if you put it on default, you might think halfway through the game, oh, for my personal tastes, combat should have been a 1, and maybe I wanted more difficult puzzles or whatever it was. So I think it's a shame that you don't have if you're a new player like me, you don't have the experience to get like an informed decision on that, because I think that's a really cool feature and could really alleviate some of the problems people might have if they just do not want to put up with some of that BS towards the end of the game. There are other like little things that don't translate well either. Obviously, this game came out on PC last year, and you've still got the PC style interface, which works all right on consoles. Like, it's not a major pain, but there were a lot of times where I was fumbling about in the item menu trying to equip weapons or whatever it was, get healing items or key cards or whatever, and it's like, I can tell this was made for a PC and then ported over to console. You've done an okay job, but it is finicky, as is the control scheme a little bit. So there's a lot, as you might expect, like you said, from a 30-year-old game to get used to. But man, this makes me want to play System Shock 2. This makes me want to like play more immersive sims from that era, because for the most part, I think it's like just a spot-on remake/remaster. No matter if you're a returning player or no matter if you're a new player, if you've ever been interested in System Shock or games from that era, like I would get it. I would absolutely get it.
That sounds good.